Welcome to On Cupán Tea. Folks, I am excited. Here we are. We're on the eve of St. Patrick's Day, on the eve of when we celebrate the death of the man who came and brought the gospel to us. Now, how did all that come about? How was he successful? This was a discussion I was having with some fellow clergy during the week, and the key that was put across for his success by Arthur was this, that St. Patrick's success in bringing the gospel to the Irish people was based on the fact that he knew the Celtic rituals of paganism. He understood the pagan practices of the time, and then he was able to go and show them from these practices the truth. Now, here's the thing. When you read missionary stories of where the gospel is being brought to different parts of the world, that proves to be the same formula of success that different missionaries have used. Now, here's also about that, what makes it very interesting is this. That goes and presupposes that the truth was there first. And what happens is that with the truth, then, it becomes contorted. People add to it and bring more to it and more to it and more to it. And so, paganism is actually the distortion of the truth. Now, how do we know that? Well, if you go to Adam and Eve in the garden, is that not what happened? There they are, and Satan goes and twists and distorts the truth. And next thing, away it goes in a completely different direction. So if we look at the topic of sacrifice, and this is going to tie back into our Celtic story in a second, but if we look at the topic of sacrifice, the first sacrifice was that of an animal. An animal's life was laid down to make atonement for Adam and Eve's sin. And then as a practice going on forward, that's what was done until Jesus Christ was to come as our Passover lamb. Now, here's the exciting thing about it. What does paganism do with that? It takes the animal sacrifice to appease the gods, but then it comes to a point that this animal sacrifice is no good anymore. It isn't strong enough. The gods are still angry, so then they go and resort to going to human sacrifice. But then it leads on even further, and this is a practice that especially has been documented in Celtic people groups, and that is, and also that it came to Ireland, is that they got to a point where they actually then started to sacrifice the High King. So if the High King ended up that he went and didn't go and provide for the people, because after all, when he became High King, as part of his inauguration service, he ended up that he was married to the goddess of Ireland. And here's the thing, that when a summer then was bad and there was no provision for the people, well, he was obviously not a good king. And so the way to get rid of him was through a ritual sacrifice. And that involved a threefold death. It wasn't that they just murdered him. No, it was very thought out. It was a threefold death. Now that got my mind spinning big time. So here we have this pagan practice that was taking place and has now been proven with the discovery of the bog bodies, such as the old Croghan man, who was a man of gentry and had been murdered in that sort of a way. So what we have then is we have this High King who failed his people being put to death after the harvest. That was when it was done. So at the end of the year, before Halloween, then if things didn't work out and there was no food for the dark months ahead, well, it was the High King's fault. And so they murdered him by a threefold strategy. Now that got my brain buzzing. So imagine this. St. Patrick is aware of this and he comes to Ireland and he ends up that he's bringing the gospel. Now here's the thing about this. Guess who is the High King? Now I don't know whether St. Patrick used this strategy. I'm just saying this is how my brain is buzzing on it after Arthur's comment. But guess what happened with Jesus Christ? First up, he is the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. Secondly, he actually died a three-way or threefold death. First, he was flogged. Then he was beaten. It goes and says that the soldiers took him out and they flogged him. Then they beat him with staffs, it says in Matthew's Gospel, and insulted him, and went and, I shall read it here. Then the governor's soldiers took Jesus into the praetorium and gathered the whole company of soldiers around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and then twisted together a crown of thorns and set it on his head. And they put a staff in his right hand, and then they knelt in front of him and mocked him. "Hail, King of the Jews," they said, and they spit on him, and they took the staff and they struck him on the head again and again. And after they had mocked him, they took off the robe and put his own clothes on him, and then they led him away to crucify him. So they went and they flogged him, then they went and they beat him and hit him over the head with a staff, and then they took him outside and crucified him. And so Jesus Christ, there was 3 parts to the way that he died. Isn't that interesting? And then it ends up that here he is, the high king. But what the Celtic pagans were making sure of, another thing, was that this person would never be able to reign again. So when they got rid of a high king, they ended up that they were going to ensure that he did not rise again. And look at the message that St. Patrick brought here, that Jesus Christ died for us. He didn't die for us go at Halloween at the end of the harvest. He died before the harvest. And here he is, and he lays down his life for us, this high king. He died a 3-fold death, something that the Celtic pagans could understand. But the difference is that he rose again from the dead and is now seated on high and ruling over the nations. Isn't that amazing? Imagine hearing that story for the first time from St. Patrick. That this high king came back, that he defeated his enemies, that they are now under his footstool. And here he is, that he is reigning on high. So when the high king of Ireland was listening to this story, what impact did that make on him? You know, it's proven that this 3-fold death actually continued in practice even after Columba was a saint here in this island. So 200 years after Patrick, it was still being practiced. But Patrick's message was this: here was a high king who died, a high king who rose again, and a high king that brings life to the people. And that's the message that St. Patrick brought. Isn't that amazing? Think about it. From sacrificial killings. So in other words, here's the truth. And what is being done is the truth is being extracted out of the pagan practice and revealed for what it really is. That Jesus Christ, the Son of God, was the high king who laid down his life for you and me. In a ritual killing that the Romans carried out, as they did. That, to me, is amazing. So have a happy St. Patrick's Day. Thank you for joining me for this on Cupán.